Welcome to the Obesity Medicine Podcast with your host, Dr. Matea Rentia, board certified in internal medicine and obesity medicine. Here, we talk about a path to metabolic health, and we have real conversations about chronic weight management and living a full life. Just a reminder, I am a physician, but I'm not your physician. So everything that's on this podcast is for informational purposes, but please go talk to your doctor about what's right for you. There is no medical advice being given on this podcast. All right, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Today, I'm really excited because we have Jamie Selzler on, and I want to give you a little bit of context because I always say this on the podcast. I don't bring random people on. I bring people on where I might be following them online. I love their message. I love their story. And Jamie is really one of these people that has been on an amazing transformational journey. And every video, Jamie, that I watch of yours, I feel inspired. And so I just messaged you and I said, hey, could you come on the podcast? And you've been so gracious to come on. Can we start with people that have not had the privilege yet of getting to know you on your channel? Can you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you? I don't even know that I know very much about you either.
Sure. Well, first of all, huge honor to be here, Dr. Rentia. I've been listening to your podcast for a super long time. And there's only a few podcasts that are really focused on obesity and particularly like the medical treatment of obesity. And I like other podcasts that are just about the fitness side, which I think is great. But I like that this is a disease and you talk about that. And I really appreciate that. So thank you for having me on. I'm Jamie. I guess what brought me to this community is that I used to weigh 652 pounds. That was my highest weight 3 years ago. And I've lost 340 pounds over the last 3 years using only GLP-1. Glutide at first, then tirzepatide, name brand is what I use. And so I've used that over the last few years. But my story is obviously, I'm not just that. I live in North Dakota. I'm 46 years old. I've worked in the tech space, Amazon and Walmart e-commerce for most of the last 25 years. And except for a brief foray into politics where I'm fairly politically active as well, and I do some of that stuff. And I started posting on TikTok and Instagram about this stuff really just a few months ago. It's pretty recent that I started. And the reason I didn't talk about this for a long time, because I never envisioned talking about this at all. But I realized that, one, people are asking me, hey, what are you doing special? And I didn't feel comfortable not being fully honest with those around me. And I don't judge anyone who isn't, because everyone has their own story to tell. And everyone has their own their right to their medical privacy. But I didn't want to just say, well, I'm eating better and working out, even though I was, because there are other people in my life who also have obesity or have overweight and who could really benefit from GLP-1. And I don't want them to feel like I did it on my own, quote unquote. And so I just started speaking out about it. And then a few months ago, appeared on a very large podcast that I knew would get some attention. And so I started posting about this. And I really try to focus on the mindset aspect and goal setting, and I have some rules for myself. So that's really who I am and why I'm doing what I'm doing. This is not something I ever intended on making a major part of my life, but here I am.
Thank you for having shared this. I find this is maybe a theme in my life. The people that I like the most are those that they didn't go out like wanting to be an influencer, because there's something very contrived about that. And there's something about when you've been through an experience and you are, like you said, sharing because you want to help others. It's just a different energy behind it. Yeah. And so I really appreciate that. Can you take us back to what did your life look like before you started this journey? What moment did you hit where something changed? Because I'm sure in the past, probably there were a bunch of things that you did.
Yeah. I've been over 500 pounds since like maybe 2001, so 25 years roughly. I've been over 500 pounds. And during that time, I tried to lose weight multiple times, like 100% of those listening probably have tried to do. And there's a few times I had success losing weight. I think many of us are pros at losing weight.
Oh, yeah.
It's the keeping it off that's the hard part. And so in the past, I did an Atkins-style diet in the early 2000s. Was working out a lot. Didn't really like that I was just eating meat all the time. I eventually hurt myself in the gym. And then my head at that point, it's like, well, I can't work out right now, so I might as well not eat that well, and fell off and gained all that weight back incredibly quickly. Yeah. And then another time around 2015, I lost 100 pounds in like just a few months using a medical diet with my doctor at the hospital, using essentially meal replacement, shakes and bars, and lost a lot of weight quickly. Did not do any working out during that point. So I think I lost a ton of muscle, which is why I'm such a huge advocate for resistance training as part of this process. Yeah. But part of why I lost the weight during that time is I had to go in and get weighed every week. And it was a group thing where there were 15 of us in this group going through this program together. We would all go in, we'd all get weighed in front of each other.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Did you, wow, what did you think about that?
I mean, I hated it, but my ego would not let me show up and not losing weight.
Yeah, that I was
So,
wondering
I
about.
mean, it was accountability, and I appreciated the accountability aspect of it.
Yeah. It's like people go one of two ways with that. So you went
Yeah.
the way of letting it positively fuel you.
It certainly caused me to lose weight. I wouldn't say it was probably positive. I mean, I definitely lost weight. I wasn't necessarily doing it for the right reasons. I was doing it to protect myself from embarrassment. And I ended up moving after about 3 months. I moved to a different state. I moved to Seattle for work, and I gained all of the weight back. I lost almost 100 pounds. I gained all of it back in 3 months. I lost
Yeah.
it in 3 months and gained it right back in 3 months. But in the process, I'm sure I lost mostly muscle.
If we can just stop here for a second, it's really interesting that you're bringing up all these different, let's just call it modalities, right? Or like ways of doing things. Because I've never been a fan of the meal replacement route because unless you plan long term to keep that, it doesn't work. So I'll give you an example. I've had patients that are truck drivers. It works well for them because they'll be able to continue their route. They just take a drink, but
Yeah.
other people, it's not realistic. And then you're in this cycle because you'll lose the weight. And then the doctor's like, well, then let's do it again in 3 months. And so you're just like constantly up and down and up and down. And I find that stop start energy to be really hard long term. So
Yeah.
it's good to hear your experience with it.
It certainly changed my relationship with food or even with friends or family. I remember going out to a wing place and I didn't order any wings or a beer. And normally I would have even had just a couple wings and a small beer, but I didn't because I had my weigh in the next day. And it didn't work for me because the food noise never went away. None of this made the food noise stop. It made the numbers on the scale drop. It also really taught me, and we'll talk about this a bit later, it really taught me that any focus on the scale as the goal, at least for me, is not a good idea. And I learned it during that. But anyway, so I gained the weight back and then gained weight fairly dramatically during COVID. So I went into COVID weighing maybe 550 pounds.
Mm.
I previously had lived in England and moved back to the US.
Yeah.
And I worked for Amazon at the time. And when COVID started, Amazon got very, very busy, as you would imagine. And I worked at our corporate office. And I started working 80 to 90 hours a week. And I was working from home for the most part. And literally all I did was work and order meal delivery, food delivery. I did that for a year and gained the highest number I ever saw on the scale was 652 pounds. I suspect I was probably 675 or north of there,
Yeah.
but I didn't want to use the scale because I knew it was going to be bad news. So I just went a
Yeah.
year without weighing myself.
Yeah.
And when I eventually got to that weight, to that I'd say anything over 600, my life really changed dramatically in lots of ways. My mobility became almost non-existent. I couldn't walk more than 20 feet without getting out of breath.
Oh,
And the combination of the physical aspect and the how much working I was doing caused me to eventually quit my job. It took a few months to leave. It was called the long goodbye, I called it, but eventually was able to get out of there.
yeah.
And it was because I'd come back to North Dakota where I'm from, and a number of my friends and family had seen me at 650 pounds, and were all pulling me aside individually to tell me that they were worried about me, that they
Yeah.
were scared for me, that they thought I was not going to be around a whole lot longer. And I began to look around and realize I was 43. I looked around and realized that there were no one my size was in their 50s. They had all died,
Mm.
all of
Mm.
them. Or if they hadn't died, they weren't ever in public. They were
Yeah.
just at home. And I had a few turning moments. One was a friend of mine, a hero of mine who I just respect. I get emotional even talking about this or thinking about him. He's in his 70s and was at his place one night with a group of friends, and we were all leaving. And as I'm leaving, he pulled me aside, and he was, I think, 74 at this point. And he pulled me aside and said, Jamie, I want you to go to my funeral. I don't want to go to yours. And when someone in their 70s tells you that they think they're going to be at your funeral because of your health, it was sort of eye-opening. Around that same time, I mean, all this stuff happened all within about a month or two of each other. And this was fate or the world or whatever, like telling me I needed to make a change. Around that same time, I went to Florida for my sister's wedding. She got married on the beach. I officiated her wedding. And I had not been on the sand in decades. I knew walking on the sand was going to be hard at my size. I did not anticipate that it would be nearly
Oh,
impossible,
man. Yeah.
especially in the panhandle where it's like this really soft sand. And anyway, we get through the wedding, and after the ceremony, we're like 20 of us, we're standing for a group picture, and I step wrong and I fall. And so I fall on the beach with the sand. I hurt my knee. I didn't realize till later I'd torn the meniscus in my knee. But at the moment, I could not get back up because I was so big and there was nothing to hold on to.
Yeah.
And I was laughing because it was sort of funny, fall in the sand. It's not like I cut myself or something. But I was laughing and I couldn't get up. And in my head was absolute pure terror about one thing, which is someone's going to pull out their camera and record me at 650 pounds. And here I am stuck on the beach, and I'm going to become a viral superstar as the beached whale overweight guy. And fortunately, one of the people at the wedding is this amateur power lifter, and he got me up by some miracle. And so I never became a viral star. But if he had not been there, someone would have recorded me. And just knowing how the internet is and how people get turned into memes, I know what would have happened. Got up, that was an eye-opening. And then a few weeks later, I was back home. And I'm just being like honest with people because I think my reality is the reality for other people.
Yeah.
If not yet, it will be your reality if you're not able to get this stuff under control. Couldn't get up off the toilet. I couldn't get up. I was physically not strong enough to do it and was terrified that I didn't have a phone, I didn't have a call, and terrified not that I was going to die at that moment. I knew worst case I'd throw myself on the floor and crawl or something. But I began thinking like, do I die this way in a situation where I physically can't get help?
Yeah.
And it led to things like if I have some sort of serious medical issue, cancer or a heart issue, I can't be treated because I'm too big for a lot of the machines in the hospitals.
Yeah.
And then I started looking at stuff like, what do you do with a body my size? Like, can I be cremated? Dark stuff that you begin to
Yeah.
look at.
Yeah.
Anyway, all of these things happened over the course of a couple months and told me that I really needed to change. And this would have been 3 years ago. And at that point, I just started eating a little bit better, moving a little bit more, and I was able to lose 50 pounds that first year, no medication, which is great. I'd been gaining for years, so the fact I lost
Yeah.
anything is wonderful.
Yeah.
But that was an insanely hard year because I was constantly fighting a battle in my head against the desire to eat and the food noise
Yeah.
all the time. And after a year, I eventually got an obesity specialist. And that's why I constantly tell people when you find a medical provider, find someone who really specializes in this work.
Wait, can I ask you, had you up to this point you had not seen? Because like who was running that that program that you were doing?
That was 2015. That was my previous primary care doctor using their medical weight loss program in the city that I was. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So
So,
can I just ask, and feel free to not answer this if
yeah.
you want to answer this.
No, I'm open
Had,
book.
had primary care not said to you, hey, let's do a surgery, let's refer you to a specialist, had that been recommended or you weren't open to it or?
No doctor had ever said anything to me about my weight.
Wow.
And I'd been 450, 500 plus pounds for years. And so I broke my wrist twice in like 2011, 2012. I'd fallen. And I went and saw my doctor every year or two when I was younger. The thing is, at least at that point, none of my labs were bad. They were all good. I've always had low cholesterol. I've never had any significant heart issues. And so my numbers all looked pretty good. Blood sugar for many years was a little bit high. Then it got higher near the end. But if you were to look at my chart, other than the number on the scale, I was healthy. That's why I get concerned about this stuff. It's like, can you be healthy at any size? Sure, at that moment in time, you may be healthy at a certain size. But I was aware at my size, I was a ticking time bomb that just had not exploded yet.
That's what I tell people is because there's a lot of talk in this area. And it's, for me, I call it the off the cliff moment where it's like, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine. And then suddenly there's diabetes and heart disease and all the
Yes,
things
all
that
at
hit.
once. Yep.
And I don't know that I've met anyone yet that at a certain point that does not occur because there's just
Yeah.
certain physiologic realities within our body.
Yeah. Oh,
But
100%.
I just have to see if I can process this out loud for a second with you. I'm really shocked that your physician didn't ever bring it up because I feel like everyone is constantly getting traumatized with it being brought up all the time.
By the
And you're
doctor.
telling me that you had the opposite where no one even was going there with you.
No one did. The only time it came up is when I would bring it up and I would say something like, "Oh, I want to work out better." And for many of these years, I had sort of slightly elevated blood pressure that had not been medicated. And the reason I started the medical weight loss program is because I'd seen some advertisement for it and asked my doctor, who was aligned with that hospital, "Hey, can I do this?" And then he referred me to that group. Yeah.
If you do you think if someone in this time had said, "Oh, I would recommend bariatric surgery," because I feel like GLP-1s, like years ago when you were talking about, were not, it was not as known to primary care and things like that, right?
Yeah.
Would you have been open to that, or do you think that the timing wasn't right?
It would have depended on the message. So I was aware of bariatric. I had friends who had had it. In my head, I thought that it was sort of the easy way out. Same thing with GLPs. And I was worried about doing something that was permanent and all of that.
Yeah.
And my numbers were okay. And at this point, this is 2000s into the 20 teens. My mobility was still okay. My
Yeah.
labs were okay. If I'd had a medical provider say to me during that point, "Hey, your numbers are fine now. You're okay. Another 10 years of this, and you're going to be in major trouble."
Mhm.
And if they would have maybe scared me a little bit rather than reassure me that how good all my numbers were, that might have got me to think about it.
Well, but you know what you bring up, I don't know if it's scaring so much as in medicine, we see the trajectory. Like when you were talking about how you looked around and you had that moment, we were like, there are people not 10 years from now that are my size that are in this room. When I was in medical school, well, past medical school and residency training, I did a hospitalist month where you admit people and you take care of them, I think internal medicine,
Yep.
inpatient.
Yep.
And I kept a list of those patients because I always liked long-term taking care of people. And I wanted to see, okay, in a month or two, where were they? Had they bounced back? Half the patients were dead. And the reality is they were 65 or 60 or 55. They had an elevated weight set point. They were coming in with BiPAP. The point is, it's exactly what you said. And I think we see all that. And so if someone can not scare you, but say, this is what I see, and then you get to decide what you want to do with it. But it's interesting that, I don't know, it's
Yeah.
just interesting, right? The interactions that we have.
Yeah. If they had been honest about the reality, that would have scared me. Not that someone would intentionally try to scare me, but it would have been scary to know the reality of my
Yes.
situation, is what I
Yeah.
guess what I intend.
Yeah.
But actually, in 2021, I was flying back to North Dakota from Seattle as COVID, right after the vaccines came out. And so starting to fly again. And flying is horrifically bad for anyone of size. We all know that. And there was a woman next to me, and it was like a two-seater row, and I was crowding her, and I felt so bad and was apologizing about it. And she must have known and told me that she was a doctor, an endocrinologist, and
Mhm.
she was practicing on the East Coast and West Coast. She would travel back and forth between the two. And she asked me if I had ever considered bariatric, and I said no. She said, "There's this new class of medications that's out now." This would have been Ozempic at the time. And she said, "I think that over the years, these are going to rival and beat bariatric surgery in terms of weight loss." And she gave me her card and said, "When you get back, let me know and reach out to me and I'll see what I can do to help you." And
Yeah.
I didn't do it.
Why do you
And
think you didn't do it?
I don't think I was ready yet. Like
Yeah.
I had not hit my rock bottom yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had so much shame. I had so much shame tied up in my size that I mean, I didn't go to the doctor from 2016 until 2023.
Normalize this,
Yeah.
we know this based on studies and data that because of shame, we do not access healthcare as much. And so we don't get diagnoses, we don't get the help that we need, right? I'm getting chills as I say this. There's no one that comes into my clinic where that's not the case. And so when someone comes in, I'm shocked if they've had their mammograms and preventive health things because we just don't access healthcare because there's such
Yeah.
resistance when you go in
Yeah,
on so many
absolutely.
levels.
I love going to the doctor. I go to my doctor every 4 months. I love going. I want every test. If you have a test, give it to me. If there's a procedure, I want to use everything, which is why partially I'm sure insurance companies don't want people to lose weight because then they start using the doctor more. It wouldn't shock me one bit. But part of this journey for me, and I talk about this a lot in my posts and when I go live and chat and streams, forgiving yourself. I think the only way that you can really move on and create a new healthy life for yourself is you really do have to forgive yourself. Me at my heaviest eventually asked for help and got it. But there were many years prior to that where I didn't ask for help or I didn't act the way that I should have. I didn't do the things I should have done for whatever reason. And I forgive myself for that. I love myself. I respect me at my heaviest because life at my heaviest was 1,000 times harder than life today. I lift weights like crazy today. I walk 12 to 15,000 steps a day. All of that is a cakewalk compared to what I used to do.
Yeah.
And so I've forgiven myself for not going to the doctor and not getting the tests and doing all that stuff
Yeah.
because I just did the best I could with what I knew at the time that it happened. And I encourage people to forgive themselves, their past selves, because that's the only way to move on.
100% that it's beautiful. I sometimes have people write a letter and it's, I forgive myself for dot, dot, dot. And you just stream of
Yeah,
consciousness, 5 minutes you write because it's really bottled up the judgment that we have on ourselves. But the other thing that I also say to people is you were doing the best that you knew possible, right?
yeah,
I don't know if in those moments you were trying to volitionally do stuff negative. I mean, same with me. I think I was surviving, right, at my
sure.
highest. And there's something that almost makes me want to cry about that because I think what's so hard about this disease is that I think we think it's like an intentional choice. And I don't think majority of it is. There's a lot of factors driving like food noise and a lot of things like that. And so it's so hard that we think it's this conscious process when a lot of it I don't think is run consciously. So
Yeah,
that's why it's just hard.
for sure. Giving grace to yourself is a powerful thing to do. And there's just so much shame tied in having obesity. I talk now, I mean, constantly. That number 652, 652 is my highest weight. And for many of us, especially those listening, that number, the number at your highest or whatever you are today, a lot of people have so much shame tied to that number. That is a number that I never imagined I would ever say out loud because saying that number out loud to me was going to be admitting a truth that I didn't want anyone to know.
Mm.
And I found the more I say that number, the less power that it has over me. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I was 652 pounds. Try living at 652 pounds or 500 or 300 or whatever it is for you. I'm also very tall. So, I mean, it's 6'2", 6'3", so I can handle it maybe a little more than someone else could. But I take the power away from that number. That number now is, I'm probably proud of it more than anything that I made it through and that I survived. But yeah, that's where I am. So 2 years ago, I started on GLP-1. I started semaglutide, did that for about 6 months. Then there was shortages, as everyone who's been on this for a long time can remember, and then was forced to move to tirzepatide, which was a great move in hindsight. And that's what I've been on ever since. In the last 2 years, I've lost a significant amount of weight. I got down to 600 before the medication.
Yeah.
But I do all sorts of other stuff. I lift weights 4 days a week. I walk 12,000 steps a day. The things they tell you you're supposed to do that are impossible when food noise
Yeah.
is crowding everything out. Once I got rid of that food noise, I was able to actually do this stuff.
So I'm curious. Okay, so you get on the med, but then what was some of the first steps that you took? Because it's like right now, like I don't want people to compare your journey right now to their beginning.
Yeah.
So what were some of those first things where it was like, these were the first things I did that were accessible, that were reasonable? Everyone has a
Yeah.
secret sauce in the beginning. What do you think
Yeah.
yours was?
Once I started GLP-1, I did not lose anything for 3 months.
I
I
love that this happened. Can I just say
Yeah.
that? I
I love that
love
it happened too. I love that it happened too. Because people see my before and after pictures and they compare themselves to me and they think they're doing so great. And they come and they say, I've only lost 10 pounds the first month. And I'm like, 10 pounds? You've won the lottery. Congratulations. You've won the GLP lottery, the GP lottery. Congrats. I lost nothing the first 3 months. The food noise started to go away a little bit during that time. My eating changed a little bit. My movement didn't change a lot. So I've developed these 4 rules for myself over the course of time. But the first one that was part of this is that I began to keep the promises that I make to myself. And that's the first thing I honestly changed. It is so easy for us to break the promises we make to ourselves. We keep promises to others, people that we love, but we break the promises we make to ourselves because we don't necessarily have to be accountable to them. And what I like to remind people is if you make a promise to someone that you love, you keep it because you love them. If you make a promise to yourself, you should keep it because that's how you show you love yourself. How we demonstrate love to ourselves and others is keeping the vows and promises we make to them. That's truly what love means.
Yeah.
And so I began to make promises to myself. And at first, they were things like water, like how much water am I drinking? The biggest one I made right away was about movement. And it was that I would not take the easiest path every time. Something as small and simple as when I was going to a store, if there was a sliding door and then off to the side was like a old school push pull door, I go to the side door and I pull it open or I push it. It's a few extra steps, it's a little bit of resistance, but more than that, those little things in your head begin to tell you you don't have to do the easy thing all the time. And it retrains your brain to not look for the easy path. And that's a huge difference that happened in my life right away.
It's brilliant, to be honest. Yeah. Yeah.
And so I started keeping promises to myself. And then after a few months, I began to, and I always caution people about this because everyone does things differently, but I really needed to weigh, measure, and track my food to really get a sense of what I was eating. Because there were things that I knew logically, but I didn't fully understand. I used to make, I still love stir fry vegetables. And I'd make all these vegetables and broccoli and peppers and be like, why am I not losing weight? And not aware of the calorie density of olive oil that I'd put in there. And so I had to start doing that stuff, and it made a real change for me. But when I realized, this is probably about a month or two in, when I realized that life had changed with GLP-1, is that for many years, every Sunday morning, I would go to McDonald's. It was just this habit for years. I'd go to McDonald's, I'd get four sandwiches and two big orange juices and whatever, and probably, I don't know, 2,500 calories maybe. And I did it every Sunday morning. And then there was one Sunday after I'd been on GLP for 6-ish weeks, and I was driving to McDonald's out of habit. I did it all the time. And halfway there, I stopped, and it literally was like this flash in my head. I just said, why are you doing this? You're not even hungry. Like, you don't want to do this. And I pulled into a parking lot and I had one of those little self conversation that we have with ourselves that takes a minute. And I turned around and I went home. And this is the last time I ever did that. I've never had the desire to do that again. And that was the moment that I realized things were different. And for those of us who've lost weight in the past or trying now, it sometimes feels like a little bit like gambling or like an election or your favorite TV show that's ending, and you don't know how it's going to go. You have hopes. You hope your person wins the election. You hope you win that lottery, but you don't really know. At that moment, instead of my new journey being about, I hope this works for me, I realized, oh, this is going to work for me. I know. And once I was aware that this is going to work for me and this is going to be my life now, that gave me, I'm getting emotional. I've, I, one sec. All the talk I've done about this, I've never gotten emotional about it. What have you done to me, Dr. Antia? I realized then all the effort that I'm about to put in is going to pay off for the first time. And it changed my life.
Yes.
All right, I'm better now. I'm
Okay.
better.
This moment that you're talking about, I really think that everyone goes through this when it's lasting, where this moment where I call it the crack in the foundation moment. It's like your actual identity changed and you had hope. And this wasn't just, we're going to be trialing random things.
Yeah.
It's so powerful what you just shared. And you know what I also love too? It's like, it was random. It wasn't this big proclamation, this big, I'm going to set out and do whatever. It was like you
Yeah.
were doing the normal thing you were going to do. And then you just had this moment and you listen to yourself, right? Because you could have been like, nope, still going to go do it. But
Yeah.
God,
It was a powerful thing, and it made the rules I had for myself, it really just made them all easier to follow. Because now rather than think all the working out, I'm going to start going to the gym now, and I'm going to start walking now, and I'm really going to be careful. I'm going to be mindful of what I'm eating. I realized that it was actually going to pay off for once, and it wasn't going to be, I'm going to do all this stuff and still be overweight at the end. But yeah, that was a pretty life-changing moment. I've not done that since. I've not had the desire to do that. I could do it. The difference now is I know I could go do that and I'd be fine.
yeah,
But I just don't want to.
yeah.
So that food noise going away in that moment made a difference. And after a few months, just started adding more rules and one on another. And next thing you know, bada bing, bada boom, I've lost 340 pounds.
Okay, I want to go back to something though. You know how you said you had to track and measure stuff,
Yeah.
right? And I know everyone has different strategies around this. I'm curious. We actually didn't talk about how long you struggled with weight. Was it your whole life? Was it in childhood
Starting
too?
when I was about 10 years old. Yeah.
Okay, because everyone has a point.
Got addicted to Mountain Dew when I was 10 years old. And there
Mountain
you
Dew.
go. Yeah. Yeah.
That's the right. But I find that when people have really struggled a long time, the tracking is very triggering. So you
Yeah.
didn't experience that, or were you starting to think differently about it? Yeah.
No, I mean, that's why I always caution people when I talk about tracking is it's in some cases it can cause disordered eating or bring back disordered eating for people. And so some people, there's all sorts of different ways to do it. In my case, it was fine. But for me, it was really about the mindset of it.
Yeah.
I did not view the tracking as this is a way for me to restrict what I'm eating. I really viewed it as I need to make sure that I'm nourishing my body, particularly with protein. And For me, without tracking, it's just a guesstimate. At this point, I probably track 80% of the time. I've gotten much better at it. But whenever I eat at home, I measure how much spray oil I'm using. And it takes a few minutes. It's never really been very triggering for me. But I also don't really, we'll talk about the scale. I don't really care about the scale a whole lot either. But people need to be careful about that because for some, that can cause them to restrict, which is
It's
not good.
it's the mindset though, it's what you're talking about. Because I find if people have that to begin with, normally when we start to work together after a period, they're okay to track. Because, for example, if we have the thoughts behind tracking, how fun can I make this?
Yeah.
How can I make this higher protein? How can I
Yes.
make it taste better? What crunch can I add? Instead of, like you said, what can I take away? It becomes very different. Also, to your point, yeah, you sometimes go the opposite direction of malnourishing and then you just have no idea. Also, the circuitry is a little off when we first start and when we're going down this journey. And so like those loving boundaries, if that's helpful, I think that's great. But I want to double back to your first thing here where you were talking about keeping promises we make to ourselves. I think that this sounds great, and I agree. My whole philosophy with people is let's make the commitment small enough where you know
You can do it.
100% you can do
Yep.
it, right?
Yep.
So, but how did you do that? Because I think that a lot of people, they're in a hard place. They're struggling. Like intellectually, we know a lot of the things. Like most
Yep.
people are very smart. It's usually not a knowledge problem. But how did you bring what you were doing down to scale enough where you could do promises and keep it to yourself? You know what I mean?
Yeah, you only make a promise that you know with certainty that you can do,
Yeah.
but is not easy. I can make a promise myself that I'm going to lift up my AirPod case. Promise kept. That's a silly promise to make to yourself.
Yeah.
Now, if I make a promise to myself that within the next hour, I'm going to stand up and drink one glass of water and then sit back down. I have an hour to do that. That's the type of promise I started making to myself at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest, I mean, there's so many big mistakes we all make, and we've all made when we're trying to lose weight. The biggest mistake is trying just to do everything all at once. Like starting Monday, I'm going to eat better. I'm going to drink my water. I'm going to sleep right. I'm going to go working out. I'm going to do all this stuff. And what happens when you try to do all things at once, all it takes is failing one thing to cause you to give up on everything.
Right. Like
And
it
so
short circuits it, right?
it does. So make one promise of something that you have to work a little bit for, but you know you can do, and just do that. And the thing is, you don't have to do all of it. For those on GLP, that promise could simply be, I'm going to take my injection every Sunday or whatever it is. Pick a promise that you know you can do. And once you consistently do that, where you're like, okay, now I'm going to add a second one and a third one and a fourth one. And that's really how you do it. And it's not as difficult as it seems because they're small enough that you're just building habits. I mean, it's just building habits is what you are.
Yeah.
Which actually is part of the second rule I have, which is I rely on consistency and discipline over motivation.
Mm.
Motivation is great, but motivation runs out. I view motivation and inspiration as different things. I was inspired to lose weight because I did not want to die.
Mm.
That didn't motivate me to lose weight
Yes.
necessarily.
Right.
Motivation to me is like a daily thing.
Yeah.
And so in my case, I work out, I lift weights 4 days a week. I don't really do any cardio, I'll be honest. I don't use the treadmills. I rarely sweat. I just walk and lift weights. And I do it 4 days a week. I walk 12,000 steps a day. I didn't start with that. I started with 1,000 steps a day. But there are some days I'm motivated to do those things, and it's fantastic. I love when I'm motivated. But many days I'm not. I'm motivated often just to lay in bed or watch Netflix. Like that's my motivation often.
Oh.
But I make a promise to myself and I'm going to be consistent with it. And in my case, GLP-1 actually makes that much easier. I still have to do all the work, but it makes it easier to do. But relying on a feeling of motivation to do anything is a recipe for disaster because it runs out because we all have bad days.
Yeah.
So instead, just say, what can I consistently do? What promise can I make myself that I can consistently do? And then do that. And if you can't do that, then that means that the promise you're making, maybe it's too big of a promise at that moment, and you have to think a little
Totally.
smaller until you can actually be consistent.
I always say when people are not consistent, they're like, but no, it is small, it is reasonable. I'm like, well, it's not. Because if it's not happening, that means that there's friction somewhere, there's an obstacle. So
Yeah.
clearly it's not as quote unquote easy as we think. If you were to think about all the things that you did, and obviously this is ever evolving, but do you think there are things, and some of them you've already mentioned, but some things that worked better than others or some things that really didn't work? Maybe that surprised you where you were like, you thought that was going to be the way and it didn't work out?
It's another rule, but I'll give a little hint at it. It's about the scale. It's about the number on the scale. I thought that having a goal weight, we always hear about having a goal weight and what's your goal weight? And it's still a question everyone asks me all the time.
Yeah.
What's your final goal weight? And I realized early on in this process that if I was focused on a number on the scale, like I had been all the other times, I was going to fail. And so that initially happened when I was on GLP-1 and I wasn't losing anything the first 3 months. There was a part of me that intellectually knew, okay, weight loss isn't linear and all those things, but it's still hard to not see the scale move. And so I really made a very conscious decision that I was not going to allow the scale to hold any sort of negative emotion over me. And so I was initially weighing once a week and I started weighing daily. Now, again, this is one of those things where people have to make sure they are in the right headspace and mindset for something like this.
Yeah.
Because for some people, weighing themselves daily and weighing, measuring, tracking food can cause some real harm. So
Mm.
if this is you, then maybe this isn't a good idea for you. Or I would certainly encourage you to maybe seek some therapy to see that if there are things that you can work through that would help do this stuff. But I started weighing myself every day and I said no goal weight to my doctor. My doctor's like, "What's your goal weight?" And I said, "I don't have one." At this point, I was just over 600. Then he asked the question differently. He's like, "What weight would you be where you would feel like this was worth doing?"
Mm.
And my doctor's fantastic, by the way.
Mm.
And I said, I guess if I got to like 400 or 450, that'd be pretty good. Because when you're 650 pounds, 400 is freaking skinny. That's
Yeah.
skinny, you know?
Yeah.
And so I said, I'd be okay at 400. I think that would be like awesome. And now I'm like 310 today.
Yeah.
And so I realized the thing that surprised me, I guess, is not having a goal weight and focusing on other things ended up being way more successful for me than I otherwise expected.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad people hear that. I do talk about that on the podcast. I am personally not a fan of goal weight because I think things declare themselves. Some people, the things they're doing take them so far. It's just not predictable is the problem. We have on
Yeah.
average numbers, but we're not a textbook.
No,
And
absolutely. Totally right.
so to focus more on the things that are in our control, like at some point we can't do more than we're doing, right? There
Yeah.
is a ceiling. Like people think it's endless what you're gonna be able to do. No, there are physical realities to this world. And I find that what you're talking about when you focus on the behaviors, it goes a lot further. So with motivation, I agree that if you have it, phenomenal on that day. But yeah, we can't rely on it. A lot of days it's not going to be there.
Yeah.
And the consistency carries you. But on a hard day, are there any tips of what you draw on or how you get yourself to still do those things?
Yes. It's my rule. It's my third rule, which is I celebrate every success. Every win I celebrate. And when I say every, I mean every. I don't have my notebook with it's behind me. I have a notebook, I think there's 800 or 900 lines that I've written there. Every time something good happens, I do two things. And by good, it could mean like a big one, like the first time I fit in a booth at a restaurant.
Okay.
Even now, if I like hop out of my car pretty quick, I'm like, ooh, look at me hopping out of the car like that. I have so many wins in the car because when you're really big, you have so many bad things about the car.
Yeah.
But anyway, whenever I have a good thing, I speak it out loud and I say, this positive thing just happened to me. But I then write it down, not in a notes app, old school pen and paper. I write it down. And when you start doing that, and when I say every small win, it doesn't matter. The first time I walked from my door to the car where I didn't have to stop to like breathe for a second, that's a win. And I write it down.
Yeah.
It imprints in your brain like you're looking for these moments to celebrate because you want to write them down.
Right.
And so
Right.
you go through your life looking for these positive things. Anyway, to answer your question, on days that are really bad, all I have to do is pull out my notebook and I read through the list of wins going back a couple of years, including some of the first wins. And I realize the first wins now are things that I take for granted. Those of us who have obesity often look at other people like you just take all this stuff for granted that you can do this or walk here or
Right.
whatever.
Right.
And looking at that list reminds me of the things that I should not take for granted and appreciate. And honestly, that's worked on my bad days every single time by looking
That
at my list of wins.
I love that you shared this. I want to call this your file of fabulous because
Oh,
you
I love
pointed
that.
out, right, that I heard this term in the past, and I actually do this when someone says something nice about me as a physician, like working with me, because there was a period when I first started where you have this imposter syndrome, right? Where you're like, I don't know enough. And then patients were saying really nice things. I was like, I'm going to write this down because this is truth. They're telling me this, but I'm thinking differently in my mind. But what you're talking about, where then you get to look back at the beginning, because I tell all my patients, I need you now to take inventory and write down like physically in a journal what life looks like right now. I said, because you're going to forget in 2 seconds. We're going
Yeah,
to have achieved the 20% weight loss, whatever it is, and you're going to still want more. You're going to still be unhappy. Nothing's going to have changed and you have no perspective moment.
yeah,
But I love this. And I'm going to adopt this for me, for patients, that this keeping the list of things, because that's so good. We habituate. We think,
yeah.
oh, it's all easy coming to us. And then we forget how all of that was hard. And if we could look back and see how we lived then and how we live now, we would be crying tears of joy. Yet we're sitting there sometimes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It, Me 2 years ago, if I were to look at an average day today, I would feel like, I do feel like the luckiest person alive. I legitimately feel that way. And I feel that way because I was over the cliff. You talk about coming to a cliff moment. I fell over the cliff. I somehow survived and crawled back up using the help of medication, but also mindset. And this is what my rules are about. And if you have the right mindset and then you have the tools and the right team behind you to take care of you medically, emotionally, physically, you can really do anything. But going through your life looking for wins just fills you with a joyful, grateful heart.
Yeah.
And a joyful, grateful heart doesn't need as much external motivation
Yeah.
because your life is the motivation. The fact that you're even here becomes a motivation.
You're so right. So, like the writing down the wins, I think it increases gratitude. Like this morning, I made a big ass bag of spinach, like condenses down to nothing, did a
Yeah.
little bit of some stuff. And I was sitting there, I was like, look at you making this for breakfast as part of it. And you're so right. If we're just like, I'm having a veggie, we don't get to harness that.
Yeah, and writing it down. You got to write it down because that's where
Yes.
one, because you can look at it in the future, but two, it really does change how your brain works.
I really think it works on the subconscious, to be honest, because it's
Mhm.
like we only have access to that 10% of thoughts, and there's all this other sort of like unexamined thought. And when you write it down, I think it locks it in deeper. And I know there's good research behind writing stuff down. It's a different process. Like we can't write as fast as we can think. So it's always interesting when we like do a journal post, what's actually coming out, because we have so many other thoughts in our mind, but what was important enough to make it on the page.
Yeah.
But tell me if you think someone's listening and they're at the beginning, or maybe they're in the middle and they're just having these hopeless moments where things aren't working out. They're really feeling discouraged. Would you have any words for them?
I do. It's rule 4, goal setting. You often feel like you're failing if you are not achieving your goals. And often those goals are going to be what output goals. Output goals are things like a number on the scale, the size of your clothes, whether or not people are noticing and saying something to you. And some people love it, some people hate it. Personally, I'm a Leo, so I thrive off of compliments on my size at this point in my life. But I encourage people to think about input goals versus output goals. And it's a little bit like the promises, but input goals are things that you have direct control over. An output goal or an output metric are things that you can't control. I cannot control the scale, meaning I'm not a robot that gets to go in there and type out the little number. I can't control how the size of the shirt that I buy. I mean, I buy clothes that are too big. I'm learning that. But anyway, instead, think about what are the things I have direct control over and set your goals about those things. Again, make the goals achievable. So in my case, my goals are all about things like what am I eating, like the type of food that I'm eating, how much am I eating, how much am I moving, am I going to the gym or not, how many steps am I getting, how much water am I drinking, how much sleep am I getting. All my goals are about those things. And I set the goals to be achievable, not easy, but achievable. And my advice to you, for me, of my 4 rules that I follow for my mindset, this is the hardest one. The hardest one is setting achievable goals because we want such great things for ourselves and we set the goals often too high.
Yeah.
And it's okay to have your big why, what you want at the end. It's okay, but your day-to-day goals have to be things that you have direct control over.
I love that. So if someone's in a hard moment, what do you have control over? What is a realistic goal for you? I think that's really powerful. It's the zoom out moment.
Yeah,
Ooh, really good stuff. Do you
yeah.
think that there's anything today that we did not cover that you think the listeners need to hear?
We sort of covered it, but I kind of want to reiterate the fact that people really should have empathy and compassion and respect and love for themselves. Other people, of course, they should have that for, but you should have it for yourself. And that includes giving yourself grace and forgiveness for wherever you are today. I sincerely mean this. The fact that I am still alive is a small miracle to me of medicine. it's also a miracle that beyond medicine of mindset. And for those who are listening who are just getting started in this process, I use the word journey. We all use the word journey. I don't like the word, but I use it 100 times a day.
Sorry,
Uh,
I said the word.
yeah, no, I say it all the time, partially because some of these online social media places, they don't let you actually talk about weight loss. You have to
Yeah.
talk in coded words. But
Yeah.
if you're at the start of this, I always give people three pieces of advice, especially if you're starting a GLP-1 or trying to lose weight. Number one, don't compare yourself to anybody else. Please do not compare yourself to me. I am aware that I'm a work in progress. I am a success story. I understand that. But I am nearing the end of my journey here. I still have a lot to do. I have to skin removal surgery and all that stuff. But if you compare the start of your journey to the end of or near end of someone else's, you will automatically feel like a failure. So do not
Yeah.
compare yourself to anybody else ever. And that includes don't find out like people ask like how many calories you're eating or what are you eating? It's like, well, this is for me. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a dietitian. I can't tell you what or how to eat. You should talk to a medical provider. You should talk to a registered dietitian. You should talk to these folks to put a team together for yourself. But please respect, love, have compassion for yourself, get a help, get a team. And then probably the last thing I want to mention is the most powerful mindset change that I made, Dr. Rentia, is I used to think that a happier life came at the end of all this.
Mm.
I thought that the happier life was, okay, I'm going to have to work out, I'm going to have to eat better, and all of this stuff. At the end of this, I'll have the happier life. And I really kind of came to a realization just a few months ago that all the movement I'm doing and the mobility that I have, the finding good, healthy, nourishing, good tasting food, going to the gym and testing myself with my muscle, that stuff, that's the happier life.
Yeah.
That's not the road to the end. That's the end. I'm living the happier life. And the sooner that you out there understand that the happier life, that's the way you're going through this process, that's happier. Don't put your happiness off to the end till once you get a certain clothing size or once you get a certain number. Your happiness can be today, and your happiness can come from walking and from testing yourself and enjoying good food and drinking your water and being around people that you love. That's what happiness is.
Yes to that. Because I always tell people, what is this? You're going to wait till the end, quote unquote, to buy new clothes. Why would you not? I love this a term, adorn the vessel. Casey Markarian, she's going to be on the podcast coming up here. You need to honor where you are at this moment. This is not, we wait till the end and then we're worthy enough to spend a few dollars on ourselves. If anything, frankly, it makes it harder. So I love that the being in it. And I always
Yeah,
say, if you're hating every moment of it, I kind of think we're doing something wrong because if you're
yeah.
hating every moment, you're not going to be able to keep doing that. Just pure brilliance, everything that you said.
Well, I appreciate it.
I would speak endlessly to you, but I want to respect your time. Can you tell our listeners, where do you hang out? How can they follow you? How can they get into your world to follow you more?
Yeah, so I've been on TikTok a lot lately, so I'd love if you'd follow me on social media. I don't do this as a profession. This is just sort of something I do, but I'm really focused on mindset. Talk to a doctor about GLP. You can talk to me about my rules. I'm fine doing that. So you can find me on TikTok. You can search for my name. I have my name everywhere. Or on TikTok, I'm Jamselz, Jamselz, or search my name. And then Instagram as well. You'll find me there, my name, or J Selzler, Jselzler. Happy to talk with people and would love to connect with people on social media.
I love that. We're going to make sure to everybody who's listening, look in the show notes, meaning either under the episode or to the right or left, however it is on the app that you're listening. And then if you go to rentiaclinic.com, you click on podcast, which is /blog. We're going to have with your episode all of your social links there. So if you didn't write it down, you don't have a pen, do not worry. We'll have that all linked. And then obviously when this comes out, I'm going to be referring to you 24/7. So but
That's
just
great.
thanks again for coming on. This a true pleasure. And I have learned so many great things from you today. And I know that everybody, they're going to benefit so much from hearing this.
Thanks for having me. And thank you for the work you do. I love your podcast. You do great work. I love that you are both a provider and a patient, and it gives you an incredibly unique perspective. So, from all of us in the community whose lives are changed by you, thank you, Dr. Antia, and keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you. that marks the end of today's episode. But if you're newer to the podcast, I want to tell you about something that we have, and it's a free podcast roadmap. So this is perfect for any of you that are listening where you want to be directed to very specific episodes. So let's say that you are just starting out and you want to know, what should I do right when I start on the medications? Or you're experiencing certain side effects on the GLP-1s, or you want to know what to do if you're in a plateau, or if emotional eating is taking over, or if hunger levels are high. So we have many different categories of episodes that we've talked about, because there's a lot at this point. So if you want to be able to navigate that very easily, we have it broken down by category, and also the episodes that are there, and we hyperlink to everything. So you can just click on it and find the episode, easy peasy. If you want that, you can go to rentiaclinic.com/podcast roadmap. We'll have it linked right here underneath the show notes where you're listening. And you can go ahead and get that free resource so that it makes it easy for you to navigate, because I know that it's really hard when someone has an established podcast. I am such a podcast fiend. I'm listening to podcasts all day long. And when I find one that I love, but there's a lot that are out there, I am so lost. So I hope that you enjoy this free podcast roadmap. Again, the link to get to that is going to be rentiaclinic.com/podcast roadmap. I hope this is helpful, and let me know if you have any questions.